What's up guys, my name is Ace and welcome back to Spawn Guides, the series where I share all of the spawn locations as well as the behavior on every map in Advanced Warfare for Team Deathmatch and Domination. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the map Instinct. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so starting this off, I just want to say if you haven't seen the first or second episode of this, I highly recommend going and watching that first because I introduce a base of knowledge that you will need to understand exactly what I'm talking about throughout this series. I will leave a link to the playlist for all of the Spawn Guides episodes in the description below. Okay, so let's start it off with Team Deathmatch on Instinct. Here are all the spawn locations, or the common spawn locations, for Instinct in Team Deathmatch. As you can see, the spawns are spread all the way around the outside edge of the map. And this is what I like to see. I don't like seeing spawns in the middle of the map because that can really screw things up. So it's good to see that the spawns are all spread out around the outside edges. The bigger spawn points are the spawn points that are most likely to happen, and the smaller ones are ones that do happen every now and then, but they're really not all that common, so you shouldn't really have to worry about them too much. Now, using my zone-based system, I'm going to break down the zones here. So we have 4 zones, and then we have one spawn point that's not inside a zone at all. So essentially, if you don't have a teammate in one of these zones, then it's very possible that an enemy could be spawning in that zone. A lot of times with this map, you'll get either the yellow zone or the blue zone. So one team will be spawning at the yellow zone, the other team will be spawning at the blue zone, and then they'll be kind of clashing in the middle and kind of around the flanks as well. This is the most common occurrence, and you're going to see this happen most of the time, is one team spawning in yellow, the other team spawning at blue. Now, one really key thing to point out for Team Deathmatch on Instinct is if you're controlling the middle of the map, which is a very common occurrence, a lot of the times people will try and hold that middle temple, you aren't really influencing spawns unless you have a direct line of sight on those spawns. So just be aware that just because they were spawning at caves 1 second, if your entire team's at the middle of the map and one guy pushes into those spawns, they could essentially spawn in any zone around you because you aren't influencing the spawns by being in the middle of the map. So be ready for spawn flips like that. Also, you're probably wondering about the one spawn that isn't in one of those colored areas or in one of those zones. This spawn is usually seen as an emergency spawn. It's quite rare that you see this, but when you have enemies that are spread out all over the map and they're basically occupying every one of the zones, this is the emergency spawn that you will flip to as long as they don't have a line of sight or they aren't within proximity to this spawn. So a lot of the times, if you spawn here, this just means that the enemies are everywhere. So just a quick example to go over for you guys. We have this situation right here. We have the red team and the green team. Where would you expect a red player to be spawning right now? Well, if you look at it closely, we have green players occupying the yellow zone and the orange zone. That's very clearly the green player's spawn. They could be spawning in either one of those two zones for the green team. And then we have a couple green players that are starting to push that bottom side of the map. And we actually have one green player who's really pushing in hard towards those blue spawns, in the blue zone I mean, and therefore he's very likely blocking those spawns off. What does this mean for the red team? Well, they're spawning in the purple zone. It's pretty clear to me. So for Team Deathmatch, that's really all I have to say about the spawns on Instinct. They're very, very simple, very easy to predict. If your teammates are not occupying a zone, then your enemies are probably going to spawn in that zone, or it's very likely that they can spawn in that zone. On the other end of that, if you have teammates that push into one of those zones, it's very likely that they have just flipped spawns, and now the enemies are going to start spawning at a different zone. Also, be aware of the fact that if you're in the middle of the map controlling that middle temple, you aren't influencing spawns, so really pay attention to where your teammates are pushing, because sometimes the enemy team will start spawning behind you as your teammates push into their initial spawn. So just be ready for that if you're in the middle of the map. Now for Domination. The spawns again are actually quite simple for Domination once you learn the locations. So right here are all the spawn locations. We have 4 really popular A spawns, that's those red spawns up top. These are the spawns you're going to be spawning at almost every time if you only hold the A flag, like 99% of the time. You'll notice one of the spawns is actually outside of the caves. Some people aren't aware of that spawn location. It's not as common as the other ones, but just be aware of the fact that it is there. For the C spawns, they're all spread along the bottom left edge of the map, I guess you could say. Very, very easy to predict. Again, if you start pushing on one side of the C spawns, it's likely they'll spawn on the opposite side of those same C spawns. And then we have that one little C spawn as well that you can see kind of in the top left, I guess you could call it, part of the map between C and A. This one is very rare, and it will typically only happen when you have the guys that are holding C pushing pretty hard towards the A flag. or if you hold C and A together, then you will start getting this spawn every now and then. As for the B spawns, we only have two really popular B spawns. So if you're only holding the B flag, you're going to be spawning inside that building right next to that C spawn, or you're going to be spawning up kind of outside in the open towards the cave area. Now that one over towards the cave area is not as common simply because it's very easy to get a line of sight on that, so it's blocked off by an enemy's line of sight most of the time. So usually you'll only get that spawn if you hold A and B. Now you'll also notice that there are two very small B spawns. These ones are extremely unlikely, but I thought I'd just point them out anyways because they do happen every now and then, so I wouldn't really worry about them too much, just know that they are there. So it's pretty much as simple as that. Now, what is the most powerful position to be holding on this map? Well, the A flag does have the higher ground, but just look at the distance between the flags. The A flag is kind of way off on its own, whereas the C and B flag are somewhat close to each other, and also the C spawns, especially the ones that are on sort of the bottom left side of the map, the two yellow ones down there, those ones are quite close to the B flag. They're kind of splitting the difference between the C and the B flag. So if you die while holding the C flag, a lot of times you'll spawn really close to the B flag anyways, like this is assuming you're pushing for the B flag. You'll spawn right back by the B flag and you're right back in the fight. Whereas if you're coming from the A spawns and you hold the A flag trying to get B, if you get killed, you're usually going to be spawning way up by the A flag again, and you have a pretty long trek to get back to the B flag. So if you hold C and B, this is the power position on this map, and this is how you win consistently on this map. Always try to hold C and B. I always avoid capturing A, even if it's very easy to capture A. It'll usually get you in a bad situation because it's also very easy to spawn trap people at the A flag, and the simple reason for this is you have spawns that are inside those caves and therefore pretty difficult to get a line of sight on if you're in the middle of the map and if you don't push too hard towards the caves. So you can basically just sit on that middle temple and you can lock down those spawns and kill people as they come out of those caves, out of those spawns, and you won't actually be blocking those spawns off because you don't have a direct line of sight on them. So try to hold the C and B flag and always avoid holding A. It's usually not a good idea to try and hold the A flag. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Spawn Guides. Now I know it's kind of getting more and more brief, I'm going through less and less examples, but that's how this series is going to go. Once you start to really understand how the spawns behave, which you should kind of have a pretty good base of knowledge by now if you've watched the first few episodes, then it just gets really easy to predict how the spawns will behave on any map as long as you know the spawn locations. So the focus from now on with this series is going to be sharing the spawn locations and then a few of the little subtleties with the spawns, because every now and then there is that one odd spawn that will happen and it will really tell you a lot when you get that spawn. So I will be pointing those out throughout the series, but I'm not going to go through a ton of examples. So let me know in the comment section below which one of the maps you'd like to see me cover next. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.